boys. They were in a position to dictate even to the high-class brahmanas engaged in the Vedic rituals of sacrifice. But the smarta brahmanas, who were simply sacrificial-minded, could not understand the dictation of the transcendental devotees of the Lord. They could not even appreciate the begging of the Supreme Lord, Krishna and Balaram. Although they heard all the arguments on behalf of Krishna and Balaram, they did not care for them, and they refused to speak to the boys. Despite being highly elevated in the knowledge of Vedic sacrificial rites, all such non-devotee brahmanas, although they think of themselves as very highly elevated, are ignorant, foolish persons. All their activities are childish because they do not know the purpose of the Vedas, as it is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. To understand Krishna, in spite of their advancement in Vedic knowledge and rituals, they do not understand Krishna. Therefore, their knowledge of the Vedas is useless. Lord Chaitanya therefore gave his valuable opinion that although a person may not be born in a Brahmana family, if he knows Krishna and the science of Krishna consciousness, he is more than a Brahmana. And he is quite fit to become a spiritual master. There are various details to be observed in the performance of sacrifices. They are known as desha, place, kala, time, pratag dravya, the different detailed paraphernalia, mantra, hymns, tantra, scriptural evidences, Agni, fire, Ritvik, learned performers of sacrifice, Devata, the demigods, Yajamana, the performer of the sacrifices, Kratu, the sacrifice itself, and Dharma, the procedures. All these are for satisfying Krishna. It is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita that he is the actual enjoyer of all sacrifices because he is directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Absolute Truth, beyond the conception or speculation of the material senses. He is present just like an ordinary human boy, but for persons who identify themselves with the body, it is very difficult to understand him. The Brahmanas were very much interested in the comforts of the material body and in elevation to the higher planetary residences called Swargavas. They were therefore completely unable to understand the position of Krishna. When the boys saw that the Brahmanas would not reply to them even with a simple yes or no, they became very much disappointed. They then returned to Lord Krishna and Balaram and explained everything that had happened. After hearing their statements, the Supreme Personality of Godhead smiled. He told them that they should not be sorry for being refused by the Brahmanas. He convinced them that one who is engaged in collecting or begging should not think that he will be successful everywhere. He may be unsuccessful in some places, but that should not be cause for disappointment. Lord Krishna then asked all the boys to go again, but this time to the wives of those Brahmanas engaged in sacrifices. He also informed them that these wives were great devotees. They are always absorbed in thinking of us. Go there and ask for some food in my name and the name of Balaram, and I'm sure they will deliver you as much food as you desire. Carrying out Krishna's order, the boys immediately went to the wives of the Brahmanas. They found the wives sitting inside the Brahmana's house. They were very beautifully decorated with ornaments. After offering them all respectful obeisances, the boys said, "Dear mothers, please accept our humble obeisances and hear our statement. May we inform you that Lord Krishna and Balaram are nearby. They have come here with the cows, and you may know also that we have come here under their instructions. All of us are very hungry. Therefore, we have come to you for some food. Please give us something to eat for Krishna, Balaram, and ourselves." Immediately upon hearing this, the wives of the Brahmanas became anxious for Krishna and Balaram. These reactions were spontaneous. They did not have to be convinced of the importance of Krishna and Balaram. Immediately upon hearing their names, they became very eager to see them. being advanced by thinking of Krishna constantly, they were performing the greatest form of mystic meditation. All the wives then became very busily engaged in filling up different pots with nice food. Due to the performance of the sacrifice, the various foods were all very palatable. After collecting a feast, they prepared to go to Krishna, their most beloved object, exactly in the way rivers flow to the sea. For a long time, the wives had been eager to see Krishna. However, when they were preparing to leave home to go see him, their husbands, fathers, sons, and relatives asked them not to go. But the wives did not comply. When a devotee is called by the attraction of Krishna, he does not care for bodily ties. The women entered the forest of Vrindavan on the bank of the Jamuna, which was verdant with vegetation and newly grown vines and flowers. Within that forest, they saw Krishna and Balaram engaged in tending the cows, along with their very affectionate boyfriends. The Brahmana's wives saw Krishna with a blackish complexion, wearing a garment that glittered like gold. He wore a nice garland of forest flowers and a peacock feather on his head. He was also painted with the minerals found in Vrindavan, and he looked exactly like a dancing actor on a theatrical stage. They saw him resting one hand on the shoulder of his friend, and in the other hand he was holding a lotus flower. His ears were decorated with lilies, he wore marks of tilak, and he was smiling charmingly. With their very eyes, the wives of the Brahmanas saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, of whom they had heard so much, who was so dear to them, and in whom their minds were always absorbed. Now they saw him eye to eye and face to face, and Krishna entered within their hearts through their eyes. Within themselves they began to embrace Krishna to their heart's content, and the distress of separation was mitigated immediately. They were just like great sages who, by their advancement of knowledge, merge into the existence of the Supreme. As the Supersoul living in everyone's heart, Lord Krishna could understand their minds. They had come to him despite all the protests of their relatives, fathers, husbands, and brothers, and despite all the duties of household affairs. They came just to see him, who is their life and soul. They were exactly following Krishna's instruction in the Bhagavad Gita. One should surrender to him, giving up all varieties of occupational and religious duties. He therefore began to speak to them, smiling very magnificently. It should be noted in this connection that when Krishna entered into the wives' hearts, and when they embraced him and felt the transcendental bliss of being merged with him, the Supreme Lord Krishna did not lose his identity, nor did the individual wives lose theirs. The individuality of both the Lord and the wives remained, yet they felt oneness in existence. When a lover submits to his lover without any pinch of personal consideration, that is called oneness. Lord Chaitanya has taught us this feeling of oneness in his Shikshashtaka. Krishna may act freely, doing whatever he likes, but the devotee should always be in oneness or in agreement with his desires. That oneness was exhibited by the wives of the Brahmanas in their love for Krishna. Krishna welcomed them with the following words: "My dear wives of the Brahmanas, you are all very fortunate and are welcome here. Please let me know what I can do for you. You're coming here to see me, neglecting all the restrictions and hindrances of relatives, fathers, brothers, and husbands, is completely befitting. One who does this actually knows his self-interest, because rendering transcendental loving service unto me without motive or restriction is actually auspicious for the living entities." Lord Krishna here confirms that the conditioned soul can reach the highest perfectional stage by surrendering to him. One must give up all other responsibilities. This complete surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the most auspicious path for the conditioned soul, because the Supreme Lord is the supreme objective of love. Everyone is loving his self according to the advancement of his knowledge. Ultimately, when a person comes to understand that his self is the spirit soul, and that the spirit soul is nothing but a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, he recognizes the Supreme Lord as the ultimate goal of love, and then surrenders unto him. This surrender is considered auspicious for the conditioned soul. Our life, property, home, wife, children, house, country, society, and all paraphernalia, which are very dear to us, are expressions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the central object of love because he gives us all bliss, expanding himself in so many ways according to our different situations, namely bodily, mental, and spiritual. My dear wives of the Brahmanas, Krishna said, you can now return to your homes. Engage yourselves in sacrificial activities and in the service of your husbands and household affairs, so that your husbands will be pleased with you and the sacrifice which they have begun will be properly executed. After all, your husbands are householders, and without your help, how can they execute their prescribed duties? The wives of the Brahmanas replied, Dear Lord, this sort of instruction does not befit you. Your eternal promise is that you will always protect your devotees, and now you must fulfill this promise. Anyone who comes and surrenders unto you never goes back to the conditioned life of material existence. We expect that you will now fulfill your promise. We have surrendered unto your lotus feet, which are covered by tulsi leaves, so that we have no desire to give up the shelter. So we have no desire to give up the shelter of your lotus feet and return to the company of our so-called relatives, friends, and society. And what shall we do if we return home? Our husbands, brothers, fathers, sons, mothers, and friends will no longer accept us at home because we have already left them all. Therefore, we have no shelter to return to. Please, therefore, do not ask us to return home, but arrange for our stay under your lotus feet so that we can eternally live under your protection. The Supreme Personality of Godhead replied, My dear wives of the Brahmanas, rest assured that your husbands will not neglect you on your return, nor will your brothers, sons, or fathers refuse to accept you. Because you are my pure devotees, not only your relatives, but also people in general, as well as the demigods, will be satisfied with you. Krishna is situated as the super soul in everyone's heart. So someone who becomes a pure devotee of Lord Krishna immediately becomes pleasing to everyone. The pure devotee of Lord Krishna is never inimical to anyone, nor can any sane person be an enemy of a pure devotee. Transcendental love for me does not depend on to their respective husbands. Pleased to see their wives back home, the Brahmanas sat together with them and executed the performances of sacrifices as enjoined in the Shastras. According to Vedic principle, religious rituals must be executed by the husband and wife together. When the Brahmanas' wives returned, the sacrifice was duly and nicely executed. One of the Brahmanas' wives, however, who had been forcibly checked from going to see Krishna, began to remember him as she heard of his bodily features. Being completely absorbed in his thought, she gave up her material body, conditioned by the laws of nature. After the departure of the Brahmanas' wives, Sri Govinda and his cowherd boyfriends enjoyed the food they had offered. In this way, the ever-joyful personality of Godhead exhibited his transcendental pastimes in the guise of an ordinary human being in order to attract the common people to Krishna consciousness. With his words and beauty, he attracted all the cows, cowherd boys, and damsels in Vrindavan. All of them together enjoyed the pastimes of the Lord. After the return of their wives from Krishna, the Brahmanas engaged in the performance of sacrifices began to regret their sinful activities in refusing food to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They could finally understand their mistake. Engaged in the performance of Vedic rituals, they had neglected the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who had appeared just like an ordinary human being and asked for some food. They began to condemn themselves after seeing the faith and devotion of their wives. They regretted very much that although their wives were elevated to the platform of pure devotional service, they themselves could not understand even a little bit of how to love and offer transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord. They began to talk among themselves. To hell with our being born brahmanas. To hell with our learning all the Vedic literatures. To hell with our performing great sacrifice and observing all the rules and regulations. To hell with our family. To hell with our expert service in performing the rituals exactly according to the description of this. Hare Krishna. Thanks, Gopal. What a nice surprise. To hell with our family. To hell with our expert service in performing the rituals exactly according to the description of the scriptures. To hell with it all, for we have not developed transcendental loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond the speculation of the mind, body, and senses. The learned Brahmanas, expert in Vedic ritualistic performances, were properly regretful because if one does not develop Krishna consciousness, all discharge of religious duties is simply a waste of time and energy. They continued to talk among themselves. The external energy of Krishna is so strong that it can create illusion to overcome, even the greatest mystic yogi. Although we expert Brahmanas are considered to be the teachers of all other sections of human society, we also have been illusioned by the external energy. Just see how fortunate these women are. They have so devotedly dedicated their lives to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, that they could easily do what is ordinarily so difficult. They gave up their family connections, which are just like a dark well, for the continuation of material miseries. Women in general, being very simple at heart, can very easily take to Krishna consciousness. And when they develop love of Krishna, they can easily get liberation from the clutches of Maya, which are very difficult for even so-called intelligent and learned men to surpass. The Brahmanas continued, according to Vedic injunction, women are not allowed to undergo the purificatory process of initiation by the sacred thread, nor are they allowed to live as brahmacharinis in the ashrama of the spiritual master, nor are they advised to undergo the strict disciplinary procedures, nor are they very expert in discussing the philosophy of self-realization. And by nature, they are not very pure, nor are they very much attached to auspicious activities. Therefore, how wonderful it is that these women have developed transcendental love for Krishna, the Lord of all mystic yogis. They have surpassed all of us in firm faith and devotion unto Krishna. Although we are considered to be the masters in all purificatory processes, we do not actually know what their goal is, because we are too much attached to the materialistic way of life. Even though we were reminded of Krishna and Balaram by the cowherd boys, we disregarded them. We now think that the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply played a trick of mercy on us by sending his friends to beg food from us. Otherwise, he had no need to send them. He could have satisfied their hunger then and there just by willing to do so. If someone denies Krishna's self-sufficiency on hearing that he was tending the cows for his livelihood, or if someone doubts his not being in need of the food, thinking that he was actually hungry, then such a person should understand that the goddess of fortune is always engaged in his service. In this way, the goddess can break her faulty habit of recklessness. In Vedic literatures like the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that Krishna is served in his abode with great respect by not only one goddess of fortune, but by many thousands. Therefore, it is simply illusion for one to think that Krishna begged food from the Brahmanas. It was actually a trick to show them mercy by teaching them that they should accept him in pure devotional service, instead of engaging in ritualistic ceremonies. The Vedic ceremonial paraphernalia, the suitable place, the suitable time, the different grades of articles for performing the ritualistic ceremonies, the Vedic hymns, the process of sacrifice, the priest who is able to perform the sacrifice, the fire, the demigods, the performer of the sacrifice, and the religious principles are all meant for understanding Krishna. for Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the Supreme Lord Vishnu and the Lord of all mystic yogis. Because he has appeared as a child in the dynasty of the Yadus, we were so foolish that we could not understand that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Brahmanas said, but on the other hand, we are very proud because we have such exalted wives who have developed pure transcendental service of the Lord without being shackled by our rigid opposition. Let us therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, under whose illusory energy called Maya we are absorbed in fruitive activities. We therefore pray to the Lord to be kind enough to excuse us because we are simply captivated by his external energy. We transgressed his order without knowing his transcendental glories. The Brahmanas repented their sinful activities. They wanted to go personally to offer their obeisance unto him, but being afraid of Kamsa, they could not go to Krishna and surrender unto him. In other words, it is very difficult for one to surrender fully unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead without being purified by devotional service. The example of the learned Brahmanas and their wives is vivid. The wives of the Brahmanas, because they were inspired by pure devotional service, did not care for any kind of opposition. They immediately went to Krishna. But the Brahmanas, although they had come to know the supremacy of the Lord and were repenting, were still afraid of King Kamsa because they were too much addicted to fruitive activities. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 23rd chapter of Krishna, delivering the wives of the Brahmanas who performed sacrifices. Now we'll take a few reflections or questions. Vijay Prabhu? Would you like to have a microphone? You will get.
It appears like there's some exception to the verse where Krishna says, anyone who takes shelter of me, even though be a lower birth woman, Vaishya Sudra, can attain me. Because here the Brahmanas are very exalted Brahmanas, but the wives were more intelligent. And also, throughout the world there's billions of men, and we have thousands of women that have surrendered to Krishna. So they're all more intelligent than the billions of men who aren't surrendering to Krishna. Just a comment.
Go ahead. Yes, Gopal Prabhu.
A comment and a question. I'd heard recently on this section that the women had overheard the Aboriginal women in the marketplace talking about Krishna in the forest. And that's the first description that the wives of the Brahmanas started to be captivated by. And of course, for me, that's the principle of Shravanam and Kirtanam. They're hearing the glories of the Lord and then talking amongst themselves. And just by that process of Shravanam Kirtanam, it was inducing them to want to see Krishna and have his darshan. And then the question is there another circumstance related to the rasa dance where one of the gopis couldn't go and she also died in separation?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, as our acharyas explain, in such cases, when devotees were held back from going to meet Krishna, they got more purification than anyone because their desire intensified. Kind of like the difference between cooking stovetop rice and using a pressure cooker. They were immediately purified from any past sinful activities and they came to perfection in that intensity. And yes, there is a description of how the wives of the Brahmins, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, had overheard conversations in the marketplace. I'm not sure if it's the Aboriginals, but it's mentioned that the local devotees, just in ordinary dealings and exchanging or barter system, they were engaged in at that time would mention Krishna, and they became attracted, so much so that they were always thinking of him. So they were ready when Krishna came and called for them. Such was the case with Rukmini also. Rukmini had heard about Krishna in her father's court, where his glories were often discussed. And that's when she made the determination that she wouldn't marry Shishupal or anybody else for that matter. She would only marry Krishna, and that's why she sent him a letter. She hadn't met him, but she had heard about him. And in both cases, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions what you just said, that this is the essence of Shravanam Kirtanam. Hearing about Krishna, then talking about him, and then of course after that comes Smaranam. Remember Krishna. And as we heard in this story, their intense remembrance of Krishna is what elevated them after hearing, chanting, and remembering. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita twice, Manmanam Pavamadbhak. So just think of me. What else? Reflections, questions? Yes, Nanda.
Hare Krishna. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also says in this section that the cowherd boys were astonished by the reaction not only of the Brahmins, when the Brahmins wouldn't speak to them and give them any response, that the cowherd boys were astonished. But then, when they also went to the wives of the Brahmin, they were also astonished at their immediate response, because when they heard that Krishna and Balaram were nearby in the forest, they fainted. And they thought, what's going on here? The first one doesn't answer, and the second group faints. And then they got up and did their service and got the prasadam. But also in regards to the elevated, learned Brahmins who at the end realized, oh, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They realized that a little bit, but even though they wanted to go to see Krishna and apologize, they were still afraid of Kamsa. That's very interesting. And in the end of the story, Srila Prabhupada specifically says, because they hadn't rendered any service. So just learning isn't, or hearing, the philosophy isn't, or doesn't seem, maybe I should ask that as a question. Does that not seem like it's complete because one also has to render service and therefore get a more complete realization?
Yes, in fact, just before I came down here for the class, I was listening to a lecture of Prabhupada who was speaking on the nectar of devotion. And he was emphasizing in the verse, Sarvapadi Vanirmuktam Tapratmena Nirmalam Rishikena Rishikesh Sevanam Bhakti Ruchite, that one must use one's senses in service to Krishna. And he said that this is not some inactive process, but it requires using one's senses in the service of the master of the senses. And that when one realizes that I'm part and parcel of Krishna, that's my constitutional position, there's a natural eagerness to serve Krishna's senses. And it's also mentioned in the Bhagavatam, Shushusho Sharadhanasya Vasudeva Kataraji Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punya Tirtana Shevana, that when one renders service to pure devotees, one develops a natural desire to hear about Krishna. That's the result.
As you were making your response, it reminded me of an incident with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, when some learned scholar came to question Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. At first he wouldn't speak with him. He said, go wash the pots and then come back. And after he washed the pots and had the association with the devotees there, then he understood more of what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj wanted to say to him. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
I got that service when I first joined, and they told me, the more you make the pots shine, the more your heart will shine. It was my favorite service, still is, washing pots. It's something where when you're engaged in washing pots, you can feel yourself engaging all your senses and it's a menial service. Menial means you do something that's manual labor. And in any kind of engagement where we're engaging our senses, we naturally feel detached and we naturally get knowledge. This is one of the points that Sutta Goswami makes at the beginning of the Bhagavatam. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janaya Yashuvayuragyam Jnanam Charyarahaitukam. By rendering service to Krishna, the concomitants are knowledge and detachment. One gets that naturally. And today, when we're just leaving Govindakunda, I've noticed something that I notice every time I'm at Govardhan Hill and I see somebody doing Dandavat Parikram. Especially today, it was a little warm out there, and I saw people doing the hard labor of, you know how to do Dandavat Parikram? Would you like to do it? It's not absolutely required. Our acharyas didn't do it. But I have heard that they did Radhakund Shamakund sometimes. Nonetheless, in observing those who are doing Dandavat Parikram, especially ones that weren't doing it for profit, because sometimes I've seen on the Parikram Marg that there's certain people who are fair-weather friends, they come out there during the holidays and they do. Anyway, I won't go into that. I'll just say what I was going to say, and that is that I've never seen anybody who's doing Dandavat Parikram who looks annoyed, impatient, angry, exasperated, or even tired. And today I was reminded again, because when we were pulling out in our rickshaw, at that intersection before you get back onto the road, there were some people coming along to do Dandavat Parikram, and they were just about to fall flat right in the middle of the road, or in the section where we were going to drive out in the rickshaw. And they stepped back and they said, "No, please go ahead." And the look on their face was a look of deep absorption and happiness. And if you go to Orlando, Florida, and you notice people waiting in line to see the mouse, or walking out from seeing the mouse, they won't look like that. In fact, we meet a lot of them coming through airports and so forth after they've gone to some event where they go to enjoy their senses. And not only are they broke, but they're also dissatisfied and unhappy and impatient. Devotional service, when we engage our senses in Krishna's service, we naturally feel fulfilled. I quoted the verse either this morning or yesterday, Bhakti Parishanu Bhava Viraktir. It's a verse from the Yogendras which describes how performing devotional service is synonymous with eating. When you eat food, you get nourishment, satisfaction, and your hunger goes away. And when you engage your senses in direct devotional service to Krishna, or as it's mentioned in there, you're engaged in the surrendering process to Krishna, then you naturally develop a sense of devotion in your heart. And you also see Krishna directly for yourself. And the third thing is virakti. Means you become detached from all other things that aren't connected to Krishna. And it happens as naturally and as simultaneously, which is what the verse says, Bhakti Parishanu Bhava Virakti Anyata Trisha Eka Kala, means that three things happen at one time, means simultaneously. So three things happen: nourishment, satisfaction, hunger goes away when you eat. So similarly, three things happen when you engage in service, which is that you feel devotion in your heart, you see Krishna directly for yourself, and also you become detached from all other things. Who knew washing pots or offering Dandavat Parikram over and over again, or Dandavats, would make one happy? It's counterintuitive to the untrained mind, those who are not trained in the science of Krishna consciousness. Let's see if there's any more comments or questions. Yes?
I have more of a, not necessarily reflection, but I think lessons.
You have some lessons you've extracted from the story? That sounds great.
lessons for myself, I think. I think the first thing is how the wives of the Brahmanas were just focused on Krishna. The moment they heard about it, they just went directly without thinking about anything. So Krishna is the top priority, Krishna is the center of their life. So that's something that really was deep for me. And the second part, I think, was how even after realizing the actual Brahmanas themselves, they've understood he is Vishnu, they've understood the sacrifice is for him, yet they are scared and they don't want to go, because the rule of Kamsa and the fear should have been there for the Brahmana Patnis as well, but it was not there for them. So I'm just trying to understand, it's purely Krishna's mercy that is the difference, and he was eager to see the wives of the Brahmanas. Is that how we should take it? It would be good to get some perspective on that.
The husbands were newcomers. They had recently had a revelation about devotional service and their wives and so forth. The wives had been deeply contemplating Krishna for a long time, and they made enormous advancement. You find this also in the story of Dhritarashtra. Because Dhritarashtra was so attached, in fact, it's one of the great tragedies that we hear about in the Mahabharata and the Srimad Bhagavatam. When Krishna asked Akrura to go and talk to Dhritarashtra to find out if he really wants to go through with this. After all, he's a king. He comes from really a high background, and why should he be so attached to his sons, especially Duryodhana? And just to confirm it, because Krishna wanted to rule out all of the possibilities of averting the war. And when Akrura went there, he preached to Dhritarashtra. And then Dhritarashtra said, "Your words are glorious, but I can't follow them." It's kind of weakness of heart. And later, when Dhritarashtra had been defeated, all his sons killed, he lost everything. He was still living in the house of the Pandavas, the ones who he had tried to usurp the property from, the ones he had tried to kill, the house of lack. He had allowed his sons to run roughshod over Dharma and try to kill the Pandavas just because he was so attached to his own sons getting the kingdom. Dhritarashtra vacha dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yutsava mamaka pandavaschaiva kima kurvata sanjaya mamaka, it's all mama, it's all me, it's my sons, and so forth. Nonetheless, Vidura, who is this great well-wisher, he came and snuck him out of the house because still Pandavas were taking care of him, and he was treasured member of the family, despite everything else. It's real culture, right? And Vidura went and grabbed him and snuck him out. It's hard getting out of family life. Hard getting out of anything in this world. So you need some intervention. So Vidura intervened, and he took him to the forest, didn't tell anybody where he was going, and he started helping him, coaching him so he could regulate his senses, because he had been living a kingly life. What's more, he had been engaged in this horrible intrigue and had been absorbed in that for years. But because of Vidura's association and because he made a last-ditch effort, Dhritarashtra made some advancement. And Srila Prabhupada explains in that section of the Bhagavatam, he could have done a lot better. Although he attained some status in devotional service, if he'd started earlier and he had just given up the weakness of heart, he could have gone to the very top. And so it matters when you start and how you start and how you get into it. It's not that just suddenly the husbands, although they had a revelation and they now understood the exalted position of their wives, they had a lot of cleaning to do. And it's that attachment to position that made them hesitate. People who are bought and sold in politics, for instance, they may go along with treachery or despotism because they don't want to lose their job. It happens all the time. People just hang on because They think, well, anyway, maybe it'll blow over, nobody will notice, but they just don't want to lose their job. And I mentioned maybe the other night that when the demigods were observing the fight between Hiraṇyakaśipu and Lord Nṛsiṁhadeva, did I mention this? Probably it was at Govardhan. And you know, in the fight between Hiraṇyakaśipu and Lord Nṛsiṁhadeva, Nṛsiṁhadeva had captured Hiraṇyakaśipu, had him in his clutches. Now the devas, whose homes, whose realms, whose jobs, services, everything had been usurped by Hiraṇyakaśipu, were watching the fight. It says from behind the clouds. Because they wanted everything back. They wanted all their stuff back. They wanted status quo back. So they're watching. And what did Lord Nṛsiṁhadeva do during the fight? He caught Hiraṇyakaśipu, and what happened after that? It appeared as if Hiraṇyakaśipu slipped away. What did the demigods think then? Now we're really finished. Because we were rooting for the enemy. Think of that. The Supreme Personality of God, it appears, and then you have some doubt of whether he's going to win or not. And you're also thinking, I just rooted for the people, the guy who's fighting against him. Hiraṇyakāśipu is really going to come get me now. Imagine the kind of stricture that he's going to give to us now that we rooted for the enemy. And these are very high-minded personalities. They're servants of the Supreme Personality of God, but they're attached. As it turns out, Lord Nṛsiṁhadeva, he's half cat, right? Yes. Say yes. Yes. Yeah, he's half cat. So what do cats do when they catch a mouse? Have you ever seen it? You've watched? When a cat catches a mouse? I saw one when we were going door to door, and there was a cat. He was in Colorado. He was on somebody's lawn, and the cat was just sitting there, and the little mouse was hopping around, and then as soon as the mouse would get a few inches outside a radius, the cat would catch it in and pull it back and then wait for it. And if anybody knows cats, they like to play with their prey before they crunch them up. Sorry, I know it's a family show. And in the same way, Lord Nṛsiṁhadeva let go, Prabhupada said, because he has that feeling, like let him go, pull him back again. Then of course he ripped him to shreds. But in that case, we see that those who had a vested interest in the universe, Prahlad didn't mind at all. In fact, he wasn't afraid at all of Lord Nṛsiṁhadeva, or the whole mess. He wasn't afraid because he was completely detached. All he wanted was service to his spiritual master. That's what he said. And when everybody else was afraid of Lord Nṛsiṁhadeva, his roaring scared everybody, including Brahma and all the devas. They came to offer prayers, and they could see that Lord Nṛsiṁhadeva hadn't calmed down at all. And even Lakshmi was a little bit unnerved, because I'd never seen my husband like this. I didn't even know if that's him. So they pushed Prahlad forward, and he was very peaceful, and he offered prayers to the Lord, and he said, I'm not afraid of you. There's only one thing I'm afraid of, he said, and that's your Vishnu Maya, that I might get pulled back into it again. So this, was it Bhukti Mukti Siddhikami Sakaliya Ashanta. Krishna Bhakta Atayeva Shanta. Bhukti Mukti Siddhikami Sakali Ashanta. You know this verse? No. Krishna Bhakta Nishkam Atayeva Shanta. Bhukti Mukti Siddhikami Sakali Ashanta. It's in the Chaitanya Charita. It means that only the Vaishnava is peaceful, because he's nishkam, which means has no material desires. What's a material desire? You know the definition of material desire? Who knows?
Any desire that some pleases the Krishna?
Well, that's part of it, but even more, a cooler definition probably gives it. Material desire is a desire that can never be fulfilled. Hint. So, it says, the verse says, Krishna Bhakti Nishkam, because the Krishna Bhakti is Nishkam, has no material desire. Atayeva Shanta. Therefore, the Vaishnava is peaceful. But bhukti, mukti, siddhi, kami. Those who want bhukti, what's bhukti? Material desire, material enjoyment. Mukti, they want to give it all up, merge. Or siddhi, mystic perfection. Siddhi, kami, sakali, ashanta, means they're not peaceful. Nobody can be happy if they have material desires. It's algebraic. So this was the problem. They got started a little late, that's all. But it's good. I mean, it's wonderful that they were transformed, but then they were still afraid because they weren't perfect yet. Reflections, questions? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So, I have a question. Krishna asked the wives of the Brahmana to go and perform their prescribed duty. And because they were in a fear that they might be rejected by their husbands and the family. But when Bhaumasura he kidnapped the girls, the princesses, and Krishna, he killed Bhaumasura, and that time the princesses asked that, can you marry us? And then he didn't say you should go back, but he did acknowledge their wish and fulfilled it. So why this difference?
That's mentioned in the commentary to this story by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur when he talks about how every devotee has their own individual situation. And also, some devotees' desire is more intense or pure than others. He gives the example not of those who were kidnapped by Bhaumasura, but he compares the gopis. When they came to the forest, Krishna didn't send them home. Of course, they were the pinnacle of pure devotional service, and he compares them to the wives of the Brahmanas. He said they weren't quite at the exact same status as the gopis of Vrindavan, but they still had that very intense devotion to the Lord. And besides that, they were from Brahminical families, and as Krishna said there, they have duties to do. And Krishna is Namo Brahmanya Devaya Gobrahmana Hitaya Cha Jagatitaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. He supports Brahminical culture, cows, Brahmins, etc. That's what's mentioned in the commentary. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Krishna is telling his friends that you won't get charity from everyone all the time you go and request, and that shouldn't be the cause of discouragement. And I am thinking about how I go out to distribute books. I don't get donations or Lakshmi all the time from all the people I ask, and I can resonate with it.
Except when you use my method here in India. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and I take this advice from Krishna. I shouldn't get discouraged, so I should keep trying the next person and keep going.
Yeah. The best way to go for book distribution, the best attitude is to not have any expectation. Don't go out to sell a book, just go out to make friends. Go out to do the right thing, but don't have an expectation, because then you put extra pressure on people that's not necessary. Find the ones that are open, and there's a magical inverse relationship between our attachment or expectation for people to give us something and their giving. Because the more detached we are, the more they're eager to give. And I've experimented with this. I heard years ago about a devotee who had decided that he would give everyone completely free choice whether they give or not. And I tried it myself and have trended more and more into that realm because it's fascinating to not, there are psychological tricks or ways of cornering people and making sure step by step that they give a donation. I mean, it's not absolute, but it can be done. But there is a way also, after presenting, that you can just say, I'll give it to you anyway, even if you don't give. But if you'd like to give, it's good for you. And watching how people then feel more inclined to give because it's their free will. They're not being coerced in any way to do it. And just as a principle of begging comes up also in the Chaitanya Charitamrita when Raghunath Das Goswami is begging. You know the different stages of when he was being supported by his family. He came from a very wealthy family. And when he joined Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they were still giving him money, a lot of it too, because they had lots of money. He was using it to hold feasts for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his family of devotees. And then he stopped doing that. And then he was at various phases of taking charity, and some of it was begging outside the Simandwar gate in Puri, which was acceptable for sadhus to do. And it says there's a verse there that says if people knew how hard it was to beg, they'd always give something to a beggar. And if people who beg knew how hard it was to give, they wouldn't ask. So it's an interesting relationship with asking people to do things. But we have to do it on behalf of Krishna, because that's his wish. And even though he says in the Bhagavad Gita, just keep it cool, talk to people who are devoted, don't talk to anybody who's not devoted or austere and so forth. Prabhupada said, yeah, we still have to do that. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare
Just
Krishna.
want to share my experience about the books yesterday at the temple. So there were two women standing there, and I did what you told us to do. And they both looked into their purses and they shook their heads. And I said, oh, that's okay. And she said, no. She said, give us 5 minutes and we will give you something. So I thought, okay, that's not going to happen. And anyway, 10 minutes later, one of the ladies had gone away. She came back and she gave me some money. And then we had pictures taken together and we became friends. So that was nice.
You get extra points for those. There's different circumstances like that, like, you know, in wrestling, if you get a reversal, you get extra points. And so there's reversals where somebody says they won't give, then they give, or they say I'll be back, which is, yeah, right. And then they come back. Your faith in humanity is restored, right? Yeah. Fantastic. I mean, you can't have any more fun than going out on book distribution and experiencing all the things. It's just impossible. Doing parikram comes close, but it's not as complete. There's perfect, more perfect, and most perfect. And the most perfect environment for enjoying life is to be on book distribution. Because you're free. You're doing exactly what you know you should be doing, and you've overcome all fears. The suffering we undergo in this world is all in the mind. And the greatest suffering is cognitive dissonance. When I know I should be doing something, but I'm not doing it. I'm just thinking about doing it. But when you actually do it, like you did, then you feel free. Like, what can stop me now? I've overcome my fear, and I'm here doing whatever I have to do. And then the interactions that we have reveals the comical nature of the material world. For instance, I show somebody the Bhagavad Gita, the most treasured book in the lives of the most intelligent people in the world. A transcendental masterpiece spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, upon the reading of which one becomes an exalted personality. And then you show it to somebody and they say, no thanks, I don't have time, not interested. Well, why not? That's a good question. I mean, not to ask them necessarily. But just to think about how crazy is the material world that someone couldn't stop for 5 seconds, or they'd be averse to even looking at it, or they a priori decide that you're some kind of a heretic because your book looks different than theirs, or something like that. All that goes to building a composite view of the material world that is consistent with what Krishna just says it is in the Bhagavad Gita, and it reinforces our conviction in surrendering to Krishna, to surrender to Krishna. Let's take a couple more, and I'm not sure what time it is, but I'm going to ask Divyanand Prabhu. I'm going to go out on a limb and ask, how much time do we have left? It's just like Maharaj Katvanga. He worked diligently for the demigods for many years as a warrior. And they wanted to repay him, said, we'll give you anything you want, you just decide, and said, how much time do I have to live? And they said, you got a minute. 1 minute to live. What do we have? 1 minute.
We have about 15 minutes before we do that.
15 minutes, okay. Anything? Yes.
I was thinking about the intensity of desire that the Brahmana's wives had. And as soon as they saw the opportunity, they jumped to go for Krishna without any reservation. They said as rivers are going towards the sea or to the ocean. And I was seeing that in relation to book distribution of Sankirtan. Somebody who's reading Srila Prabhupada's books regularly also gets this sense of mission from Srila Prabhupada that when there's an opportunity arises, they very astutely catch it and utilize that opportunity to share Krishna consciousness in some way or other, and seeing that quality in devotees. It may not be on the same level as the wives of the Brahmanas, but that quality of going out spontaneously to serve Krishna.
Oh no, it is.
Oh,
Prabhupada confirmed that in an answer to a letter when the leader of the Sankirtan party, or movement actually, was working diligently to expand book distribution circa 1972, had understood from Prabhupada that the mood of book distribution was the mood of the gopis, in which they're going out to bring people closer to Krishna. After all, as it's mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that Srimati Radharani's mood is to bring everybody else to serve Krishna. And he was saying that therefore Sankirtan is in the mood of the gopis, a very exalted activity. And one of the members of the audience wrote Prabhupada a letter, which we have, and I published it in my book, and asked Prabhupada, is this exaggeration, or is this really true, what this person is preaching on your behalf? And Prabhupada said, yeah, it's true. He said, this is the mood of the Sankirtan movement, it's the mood of the gopis, bringing people closer. So it's a very high sadhana, it's not book selling or some profit-motivated idea. It's connecting the wayward souls with the only means by which they can be reconnected with Krishna, which is mentioned by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Sanatana Goswami when he said, Maya mugda jivana nahi swata Krishna gyan, jivera kripaya koila Krishna Veda Puran. And that is that the soul does not automatically come out of Maya, it's not swata. They don't just suddenly wake up. There has to be an intervention. And the intervention is with knowledge. And that's why Vedavyasa said, out of his great mercy for the souls, has compiled these literatures in order to give the soul an opportunity, when they're in a human body, to reawaken to Krishna consciousness. Yes? 1, 2.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Maharaj, can you give a few tips to overcome knowing versus doing gap?
To overcome what?
Knowing versus doing gap. Because, Brahmana seems to be knowing what they should be doing, but they were not able to do. and that is a gap, so how we can overcome that limitation, which we may also be carrying in our heart.
What is he saying? What?
How to overcome cognitive dissonance when you know
How to overcome cognitive dissonance?
Yes.
Well, if you suffer, consider how much you're suffering from not doing the right thing. And then in one fell swoop, in a brilliant moment, just say, no mas. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to do the right thing somehow or other. It's a great day when that happens. So if we consider very carefully how much we're suffering from procrastinating or doing wrong things, and we count up how much time we're wasting, and also consider how good it would feel to do the right thing. That's why I mentioned last night when we read the verse Sarva Dharman Parityaja. It's really a good verse to think about, meditate on a lot, or maybe all the time, and just think, what if I just took Krishna completely straightforwardly and said, he says, just surrender to me. How about if I just do that? See how it feels. And if there's this unwillingness to do it, just like I call it the Dhritarashtra syndrome. Because remember Dhritarashtra? He's telling him all the right things. That he said to Vidura, what you said is glorious and it makes perfect sense. But yeah, no. It's not going to happen. I'm not doing it. And so how to overcome that? One thing is to say, I'll just do it for now. At least I'll try it. I'll try it for 5 minutes or an hour or a day and just see how I feel. Prabhupada pulls that in the Bhagavad Gita when he says to the reader, he said, okay, so you don't believe in God, right? Yeah, right, I don't. He said, well, just while you read this book, do believe in God. Just for now. And so it's like, oh, all right, What happened to you, Larry? I don't know, I read this book and now I'm Hare Krishna. So we're marginal. Anything can happen. That means anything can happen, and that's pretty exciting. You can actually flip within 5 minutes. Have you ever seen anybody flip within 5 minutes? Like on Sankirtan, you see it a lot, right? Somebody decides yes, and they go no. It's like, all right. And we can flip too. We're on an edge. It's not that far away. In fact, Krishna says in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam that we're never actually conditioned by the material world, because how could we be, since we're not part of it? How could we ever really, we're not even really touched by it. He said even the concept of liberation from the material energy is a misnomer, because the fact we've never actually, asanga hayam purushaha, the Vedas say, you never ever had any connection with it in the first place. It's even the connection we think we have to the material world and all the stuff we have and the designations, it's illusory. So, on one side too, it's not that far of a jump. You just have to lean a little more until you flip. And if you just keep leaning towards Krishna, thinking about Sarva Dharma Parityaja, it's like, why not? I think of it as like, if you've ever tried to jump off something and you're afraid, and you just, like a diving board or something, you just keep getting closer to the edge, and then the wind just comes, blows you off. So we should edge towards surrender to Krishna as much as we can. It's a process. And just remember how glorious it is when we do the right thing. Okay, we'll take 2 more. Right, and you're next. And then there's one after that, and then we're finished. 1, 2.
Hare Krishna. So my question, I've got, one question. So where one person already is devotional, then would knowledge help that person to be more devotional, or is that like we know if a person is not at all devotional, knowledge does help the person then to lean towards Krishna because he's reading, hearing, chanting. But if a person has not gone through those processes but already has devotion in heart and has love for Krishna, would knowledge help it further, or what then will be the relationship between knowledge and devotion? And related to this, an experience I had yesterday was a father who seemed like in the temple when I was distributing books. I was actually giving the book to another person, but then there was one father who approached himself and took, just asked me one book, so I gave one Hindi book to him. And it was about japa, and he seemed like he don't know how to read. But he then called his son and then gave that book to him and said, see if this is good for you, will this help you? So it seemed like the father, obviously there, he wants the son to read more. So for the father, he's already devotional, he's come to the temple and doing puja and everything, but would then, he can't read, so probably knowledge will not be much help to him. So I'm just trying to understand the relationship. I know the one side works, the other way, does it work as well? Or is it necessary?
Well, we also have to understand what knowledge means. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives the definition of knowledge. He says, Kshetrajñam chapimam vidhi sarva kshetrishu bharata. Kshetra kshetrajñayo jnanam yatach jnanam atam mama. In other words, he's saying, here's my definition of knowledge. It's to know the difference between matter and spirit. Or nasato vidyate bhavo nabhavo vidyate sata uvayorapi drishton tas tvanios tattvadarshibhya. Somebody who's a tattvadarshi. Tattva means, tat is a demonstrative pronoun. That is a harmonium. What is a harmonium? That is. And it's the same word in Sanskrit. It's just take out the H, you say tat. And when you say tattvavit, it means somebody who knows what's what. And what is what? They're categories of energy, and they have different properties. I know this sounds like a long, convoluted answer, and it kind of is, but it's important. Because tattvavit means somebody who knows the difference between lower energy and higher energy. And Krishna points that out in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita when he says, Bhumir apo nalo vayu kammano buddhir evacha ahankara ityame binna prakritirashtara. There's earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Then he says, Aparayamitastvanyam prakritim vidime param jiva bhutam mahabaho ya yedam darite jagat. Besides these, there's a superior energy, tattva, or tat, energy that is the consciousness. And then there's an even more nuanced understanding. There's a difference between the Atma and the Paramatma. And so that's knowledge, to understand those categories. So a tattvavit, somebody who understands that there's matter, spirit, but then there's super spirit, and then who's developed a relationship with super spirit has come to perfect knowledge. And that's what Krishna says in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which we all know well, which says, Sarvasya chaham hridisani vishto mattak smitir gyanam apohanam cha Vedaishcha sarvir ahameva vedo vedanta krit veda videva chaham. That I'm the object of knowledge. And then he says at the end, Yomam evam asammudo janati purushottamam sasarvavid bhajatimam sarvabhavina bharata. Somebody who knows me, they know everything. So they've come to the culmination of all knowledge and they've developed a relationship with Krishna. When one has that, then one has what's called buddhi yoga, which means they know as much as anybody can know because they're directly hearing from Krishna in their heart. So the cultivation of knowledge, as you described it, was what Lord Chaitanya described as sambandha gyan. You have to know what your relationship is to Krishna and also your non-relationship with this material world and why. You have to have a clear idea of what are the categories, because if you make a category mistake, which means that you think you're your body, you're in big trouble. It's like, this is me, I'm such and such, then you've made a big mistake. So you need knowledge to get out of that, to come to the point of Kshetrajñam Chapimam. The body's a field, I'm the soul within the body. And after one develops one's relationship with Krishna, knowledge is automatic. It's constantly flowing because one's constantly in contact with Krishna. But it is important, as is mentioned by Sutta Goswami, Tachchadadhana munayo gyana vairagya yuktaya pashyantyatmani chatmanam bhaktya shujagrahitaya. He says, for those who are endeavoring for this position of solid devotional service, you have to be fortified with knowledge, Tachchadadhana munayo gyana vairagya, and detachment from the world. Those are the fortifying elements. But you do get that thrown in for free, because we already quoted Vasudevi Bhagavati. When you do devotional service, you get knowledge and detachment from the world. But Prabhupada says, in the connection with the last verse I quoted, it's vital that we study the books of the Goswamis. Why? Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally taught the Goswamis. Lord Chaitanya is Krishna. He gave the perfect instructions. They were imbibed by the Goswamis, who then perfectly presented them and systematically presented them. Nana Shastra Vicharanaika Nipano Shadharma Samstapako, in order to establish the perfect process by which we could come to knowledge. Did I confuse you more?
Thank you.
Okay. Then we're to the very last question.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. It's a wonderful lecture and presentation you do today. You talk about that the ladies have a soft heart and the ladies are a bit more strong. That's the nature of both of them. But the man has the duty to perform, to take care of the house and the family. And the ladies' duties is different. It's more like taking care of the family, more emotional, in terms of taking care of the children. So that's why they're more emotional and more easy to achieve Krishna Prema, because the love for Krishna. But the man has the duty to take care. That's why this kind of more hard heart, you know what I mean? So, for example, Draupadi was very close to Krishna. He just surrendered to Krishna. That's because his nature, heart, is soft. And Arjuna is in a male body, is different nature. So, what's the question? So, the question is how the man can be a soft heart to be closer to Krishna. That's my question, because the nature of the man is a bit more, the duty, responsibilities is a bit more strong than the woman. That's the question.
Well, ultimately, we're all prakriti. This idea that we're men or women is a designation. It's a temporary designation. That's why Krishna gives us the facility to only see this lifetime. If we were to see our many past lives, we would notice that we have had many bodies. And we'd be neurotic probably too. Like, who am I really? He allows us to settle into the illusion in this body, and we reverse that through devotional service to understand that actually the soul is prakriti, or a servant of Krishna. He's the enjoyer, we're the enjoyed. Now if someone says, oh, that doesn't sound very good, why do we have the short end of the stick? As is mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the supreme enjoyer is Krishna, but he notices that the servant of the Lord is enjoying more than he is. That's why he comes as Lord Chaitanya. It says, look I'm the supreme enjoyer. Radharani, the gopis, they enjoy millions of times more than I do, so therefore I'm going to come and be like them and enjoy being a devotee. So I was standing outside the New York library distributing books with a friend of mine one day. It was right near a yoga studio. A woman in leotards or whatever they, Lululemon or whatever, came out having done her yoga thing, and I showed her a Bhagavad Gita, and she says, "Oh no, because this is against women." And my friend came over and he goes, "Oh no, the book says we're all actually female." And he goes, "Really? Okay, I'll take it." and so, but men, women have natures, and of course there's combinations, permutations, and nuances within each type of person. But in general, the process for anyone is to chant Hare Krishna. Because when we take a vow to chant Hare Krishna and we perform devotional service, we overcome the designations that somebody thinks I'm a mongoose. And you can have a little conversation with a mongoose. I know you like snakes and everything like that, but that's due to your past karma. You really aren't a mongoose, you're a spirit soul. And same conversation we can have with anyone, because it's equally as crazy to think I'm a man or a woman as it is to think I'm a mongoose, because we're none of those. Vidya vinaya sampane brahmaniga vihastini is somebody who's enlightened, sees beyond the male and the female, but the universal process for softening the heart is to perform devotional service and chant Hare Krishna. And then naturally, the knowledge of our eternal relationship with Krishna comes, and the softness of heart, we achieve that also by the chanting of Hare Krishna mantra, without offense. It's a really important question, and thank you. Om Tat Sat. And now we're going to have the Damodar Ashtakam after a word from our sponsor. Let's see what we've won.